Discover how one stubborn young woman transformed a billionaire CEO in just 30 days. Amazing. The fog rolled through San Francisco like a shroud, concealing dreams and ambitions as Sarah navigated the glass-laden halls of her tech company. At 25, her life felt like a series of half-written equations, dense and complicated. She was an office administrator, buried under the weight of unappreciated tasks and endless college debts, and her childhood aspiration of scientific discovery felt more like a fairy tale from a distant planet. Yet every morning she tethered herself to the memory of her parents, hard-working souls who laid the foundation of persistence beneath her. But the daily grind took its toll. The billionaire CEO, Mark, seemed to embody everything she loathed about corporate America, an arrogant king ruling from his glass castle. His dismissive nods felt like a punch to her gut. The weight of his contempt hung over her like heavy fog. She convinced herself that persistence was her ally, that she just needed to hold on a little longer. What would it take to climb out of the shadow of this corporate giant? Then, one Thursday afternoon, while reviewing Mark's ambitious environmental project, anxiety knotted in her stomach. The data lay before her like a damning sentence. The projected impact on the community was catastrophic. Anger swelled within her. It screamed that she had a duty, not just to herself, but to everyone who would pay the price for greed disguised as innovation. The choice was clear: confront Mark or fade into oblivion. Her heart raced as she paced, recalling her professor's words about the power of speaking truth to authority. This wasn't just about protecting the community. It was about fighting for her future. "I can't do this," she muttered, grappling with the duality of fear and resolve. Was she ready to challenge a man whose ego eclipsed the very skyline of San Francisco? Before she could second-guess herself, Sarah stepped into his office, clutching the printout like a lifeline. "Mark," she began, her voice wavering against the polished expanse of his desk. But he barely glanced up from his computer, dismissing her with a wave. "Know your place, Sarah." Those 4 words ignited a fire deep within her, a resolve that scared her more than his words ever could. She couldn't let this die. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every night, drowning in data and a sea of self-doubt, she delved deeper into the ethics of their practices. Every revelation tightened the noose of tension around her. Could she hold on? Colleagues whispered behind her back, insubordination hanging thick in the air. She felt the weight of every eyebrow raised at her ambitious pushback against the status quo. For every small ally gained, another was lost, a balance teetering on the brink. As the days blurred into a vortex of cognitive dissonance, a breakthrough brought hope. Mark began to notice the shift, the ripples she created drawing him closer to her vision. Yet, just as hope surged, a competitor threatened to wreak havoc on her hard-won ground. An ethically dubious solution loomed on the horizon. Panic clawed at her, and as she stared at the shimmering skyline, she wondered if she could forge an alliance with the very man who had initially waved her away, and if doing so would mean losing herself in the process. The stakes were higher than she ever imagined, leaving her at a precipice. Could she navigate this storm before everything she dreamed of slipped through her fingers? The decision weighed heavily on her shoulders. She could either rise to new heights alongside Mark, or risk everything for a community she deeply cared about. The fog outside thickened, but within Sarah surged a glimmer of something fierce. The choice hung in the balance, ominous and electrifying. The morning sunshine pierced through the fog, a reminder that clarity was attainable, yet still elusive. As Sarah arrived at the office, she felt as if a threshold had been established, one that separated her from the timid girl she had been just weeks prior. With each step, the echo of Mark's dismissive words replayed in her mind. Know your place. They fueled her resolve and fueled the fire in her belly. Determined to navigate through the intricate web of corporate skepticism, Sarah laid out her strategy. She would approach this not as a mere office administrator, but as a catalyst for change. It required more than just following protocols. She had to immerse herself in the language of power and influence. She began devouring books on negotiation and persuasive communication, crafting a mental framework of argumentation that would serve her well. Flipping through pages under the stark fluorescent lights, she absorbed knowledge like a sponge, the lessons igniting her intellect. With meticulous detail, she honed her presentation of the project's environmental impacts, examining the data to arm herself with facts that could withstand scrutiny. Each piece of evidence reinforced her conviction that she was on the right path, but a creeping fear of Mark's instinctual disdain lingered at the back of her mind. At lunch, she found herself seated alongside a few colleagues who had begun to notice her escalating initiative. Their encouragement felt like a fresh breeze, pushing her forward, but doubt clung to her. Would they rally behind her idea if it meant challenging the CEO? The thought weighed heavily against the ambition she was slowly cultivating. Late the next afternoon, the ideal moment arose. Sarah caught Mark alone, hunched over reports in his office. Her heart drummed aggressively in her chest as she approached, the familiar fear battling against her resolve. She knocked lightly and stepped inside, summoning her voice to rise above the surging anxiety. "Mark, there are critical implications to the project." Her voice wavered, betraying her initial composure. Mark's gaze flicked up, sharp and guarded. "Make it quick, Sarah." His short reply could have easily diminished her spirit, yet instead it ignited determination. She laid out her research, each word deliberate as she carefully articulated the potential damage that might unfold should they pursue the current direction. She noted the consequences, highlighting areas where community trust and sustainability could fracture. As she spoke, she watched Mark's brow furrow deeper, and for the first time, she felt his attention shifting, not to her as a subordinate, but to a professional with a valid point. But just as she began to sense his defenses lowering, Mark interrupted. "This could easily be construed as weakness. We cannot allow competitors to see us hesitate." His eyes were cold and calculating, yet a hint of curiosity flickered beneath the surface. It was a critical juncture. Sarah felt the weight of his expectation. This was her moment to pivot, not to retreat. "It doesn't have to be weakness, Mark. It could be perceived as innovation and responsibility. If we present our project as a sustainable choice, we place ourselves ahead of the competition rather than reacting to them." Her heart raced as she proposed a compromise, a suggestion for a revised plan integrating sustainable practices. Would it channel Mark's ambition for the company or incite his wrath? An uncomfortable silence enveloped the room, thick with unspoken thoughts and tension. Sarah held her breath, analyzing deadlines and the repercussions of each passing second. In this suspended reality, she sensed the subtle shift in Mark's demeanor. The calculated bravado was wavering. "Let's explore this further," Mark finally said, the voice of a leader but tinged with the uncertainty of a man confronting an unyielding tide of change. As she walked out, a flood of emotions coursed through her. She had crossed into new territory, linked to Mark, not as a servant to his vision, but as an ally with legitimate input. Her resolve solidified in that corridor. She was no longer submerged in the fog of uncertainty. Yet hovering over her was the deeper question. Was this the beginning of something transformative for both of them, or just the surface of a far more complex struggle? The stakes had escalated, and with change comes unpredictability. As Sarah prepared for the next meeting, an unwelcome thought lingered. Could she fully trust the mercurial nature of Mark's ambition? Would he embrace her partnership, or would she find herself lost amid the chaos of corporate games? The next morning, anticipation buzzed in the air, as Sarah resolved to approach the new meeting with a tactical mindset. The previous day's encounter had ignited a spark, but she knew that sustaining this momentum would demand strategic finesse. She spent the early hours refining her proposal, crafting slides designed to captivate not just Mark, but the entire executive team. As she meticulously designed her presentation, doubts flitted through her mind like silent ghosts, each whispering fears of inadequacy. What if her ideas were met with dismissive laughter? What if she misread Mark's interest? Shaking off the creeping thoughts, she turned her focus squarely on the content. The completed slides did more than outline sustainability. They told a story of transformation, risk management, and foresight, addressing concerns and benefiting stakeholders in a manner that she hoped would resonate. Arriving at the conference room, Sarah positioned herself among the chairs, her muscles taut with nervous energy. She paused to collect her breath, grounding herself in the conviction that change demanded courage. As she took her seat, she noticed Mark scanning the room, likely gauging the atmosphere before diving into business. The sight of him made her pulse quicken, but she reminded herself of her newfound resolve. The meeting commenced, and the large conference table buzzed languidly with chatter before the focus turned to Mark, who cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss the project," he began, and Sarah noted how he avoided looking directly at her. It was an intentional power play, a reminder of the hierarchy she was still navigating. When her moment arrived, she stood, a low tide of anxiety washing over her as the team turned their attention. She launched into her presentation, her voice firm despite the tremor of vulnerability. The slides flicked by, each visual reinforcing a crucial point. She outlined potential risks of ignoring sustainability while simultaneously mapping out a proactive approach that could place the company in an advantageous position. As she articulated her ideas, she noticed Mark's gaze sharpening. With each passing moment, she could sense the flicker of interest deepening beneath his stoic exterior. Still, after she concluded, the tension lingered. Questions began to swirl among the executives, veering into territory that tested her preparedness. Each inquiry felt like a calculated probe. "Do you really believe the market will respond positively to this shift?" one executive challenged. "Absolutely," Sarah replied, taking a brief moment to center herself. "We're at a crossroads. Consumers today prioritize sustainability, and aligning our brand with these values can increase loyalty and market share. Companies that fail to innovate risk being left behind." It was a gamble. Each argument she countered could either enhance her credibility or expose her vulnerabilities. Mark's expression remained inscrutable as her words hung in the air, but the team began to nod in agreement, a ripple of understanding spreading through the room. Then came the pivotal moment. Mark leaned forward, arms crossed, the authoritative posturing now laced with contemplation. "You're quite passionate about this, Sarah. But passion doesn't equate to success. How do you propose we mitigate the financial risks involved?" His query pierced her with dual-edged intent, a challenge disguised as interest. Taking a steadying breath, she calmly outlined her risk management strategies, confident in her preparation. Each detail was a step closer to fortifying her position in the room. Yet as she spoke, a disconcerting thought crept in. Was he truly listening, or merely performing an act? The interaction left her unsettled, playing like a loop in her mind as Mark wrapped up the meeting with an ambiguous flourish, promising to consider her insights further. She felt a blend of triumph and uncertainty. Her ideas had reached the table, but their longevity and acceptance hung precariously in the balance. As she returned to her desk, the stillness subsided into an undercurrent of anticipation. Each interaction with Mark felt precarious, marked by a dance between collaboration and conflict. Would she be able to navigate this path without losing herself in the intricacies of corporate politics? Or would the very change she sought become a weapon against her own ambitions? The stakes were rising, and in the quest for sustainability, one question loomed larger than all others. Could she find a way to harness the unpredictable nature of Mark's ambition for their mutual benefit? Sarah's mind buzzed with the remnants of the meeting, the shadows of doubt creeping back in as she prepared herself for another day. The exchange with Mark haunted her not just for the apparent challenge but for the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Navigating the corridors of corporate politics had never been her forte, yet here she was, thrust into the thick of it, trying to carve a space for her vision. The clatter of keyboards and the rustle of papers enveloped her as she returned to work, but the noise faded into background static. Her thoughts raced back to the meeting, each question and answer replayed like a looped video. Despite her initial nerves, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of possibility. Mark had seen something in her presentation. This much she was sure of. Deciding to reflect further on the meeting, she opened her notes and began to draft a follow-up email. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she hesitated, trying to structure her thoughts. Perhaps a more direct approach could spark something productive. Instead of merely waiting for Mark's decision, she could lead the conversation. Her heart raced at the idea. Pushing against her own status quo felt reckless but necessary. With renewed determination, she crafted a proposal for a smaller follow-up meeting, suggesting a more focused discussion on the financial risks Mark had raised. This was no longer simply about sustainability. It was about proving her worth and her ability to influence the strategic direction of the company. Click. The email was sent. All she could do now was wait. The hours dragged on, a stubborn fog of anxiety settling over her as she tried to maintain her usual rhythm. But soon, a response pinged in her inbox. Mark suggested they meet one-on-one to discuss her insights in greater detail. Excitement alongside dread pulsed through her. This could either be an opportunity to solidify her standing or a chance to plummet. The next day, Sarah prepared feverishly for their meeting. She sharpened her arguments, projected potential outcomes, and conducted a mock debate in the mirror, rehearsing each line until they flowed seamlessly from her lips. Yet, deep down, she faced an uncomfortable truth. How would she handle any challenges that might arise? It felt like standing on a tightrope over a chasm. One misstep and everything she had worked for could come crashing down. Finally, the moment arrived, and Sarah entered a small conference room that felt both intimate and intimidating. Mark was already seated, tapping away on his laptop, his demeanor appearing both relaxed and absorbed. As she took a seat across from him, she squashed the familiar flutter of nerves, focusing instead on her breathing. This was her chance to transform the power dynamics into something more synergistic, partnering with him rather than opposing him. "Thank you for meeting with me," she started, trying to exude confidence. "I believe we can uncover substantial opportunities together regarding sustainability and financial impact." Mark looked up, a spark of interest flickering across his face. "Opportunities, huh? Enlighten me." Encouraged, she launched into her meticulously crafted arguments. With every statistic, every assertion, she felt the ground beneath her feet solidify. This time she wasn't merely reacting. She was crafting a narrative that could resonate with him. However, as she spoke, Mark interjected, his challenges sharper, his facade as a captive listener slipping ever so slightly. "You still haven't answered how we manage the pushback from shareholders who may not see this as financially prudent." Here it was, the counterstrike she had been preparing for. "I understand the concern," she replied, her voice unwavering. "But addressing their apprehensions head-on with clear projections about how sustainability aligns with profit margins could transform their views. This isn't just a trend. It's becoming standard within industries." Mark's gaze shifted, allowing her a glimpse of vulnerability. "You think you can change their minds? What makes you so confident?" For a moment, uncertainty hovered over her as the weight of his question sank in. It wasn't just a strategic challenge, it was personal. Could she indeed persuade them, or was she simply inflating her own hopes? The air was thick with tension as she considered his words. This wasn't merely a debate. It was a defining moment that could alter her trajectory in the company. As she gathered her thoughts, one undeniable truth emerged. She was standing not only for her ideas but for her identity and values. "Because I believe in the vision I'm presenting," she replied, her voice steady with conviction. "And I think if we communicate that passion, we can transform skepticism into enthusiasm. But I need your support." Mark studied her, the rhythm of the conversation shifting as if he were weighing the potential he saw before him. For the first time, she saw a flicker of acknowledgement, a hint that her thoughts had struck a chord. The intensity of their exchange drew them closer to an understanding, yet a quiet challenge lingered. While they both knew this was merely the tip of the iceberg, Sarah was beginning to realize the depths of her own potential. The battle for change was far from over, but perhaps, just perhaps, she had learned to wield her voice more effectively. As they wrapped up the meeting, the possibility of collaboration, rather than contention, hung in the air. What lay ahead now felt uncertain, charged with the potential for transformation. But as she left the room, exhilaration and doubt intertwined. Was this newfound alliance the breakthrough she needed, or would navigating Mark's complexities lead her down an unexpected path of conflict? The answer awaited her in the decisions yet to come. Sarah spent the following days in a haze of uncertainty, caught between exhilaration and trepidation. Mark's acknowledgment had sparked something deep within her, igniting a flame of ambition she had long kept in the shadows. Yet the risk of overstepping her bounds loomed heavily. She needed to balance her newfound confidence with the realities of corporate politics, a tricky dance with high stakes. At her desk, she scribbled notes for further meetings, dissecting every bit of feedback she had received. Each comment from Mark felt like a puzzle piece. She was determined to fit them together into her evolving strategy. The company's quarterly meeting was fast approaching, and with every passing hour, the pressure mounted. What if she could leverage this moment to elevate her proposals further? The thought intrigued her, but lurking beneath this excitement was a nagging voice, one that whispered doubts about her ability to handle the board and their potential backlash. She had witnessed firsthand how cutthroat the upper echelons could be. Confronting shareholders was not just about numbers. It required finesse, an understanding of motivations, and the capacity to anticipate blowback. Relying solely on her convictions might not be enough. Determined, Sarah decided to reach out to her mentor Naomi, who had a long history in the industry and a knack for navigating tricky scenarios. Over coffee in a bustling cafe, Sarah laid out her budding relationship with Mark and the looming quarterly presentation. Naomi leaned in, absorbing the details. "Listen, Sarah," she said, her tone earnest. "It's admirable how passionate you are. But don't underestimate the dynamics at play. You need an ally, someone who believes in what you're pushing for, or at least sees the strategic value in it. What about Mark, then? Is he that ally, or is he simply playing both sides?" The thought struck Sarah like lightning. Was Mark truly on her side, or was he simply toying with her, using her enthusiasm to further his own agenda? As excited as she felt after their last conversation, the prospect of his wavering loyalty made her stomach twist. "I think he sees potential," Sarah replied, trying to dispel her doubts. "But the reality is, he's still focused on shareholder interests. That's not going to shift easily." "Exactly," Naomi pressed, nudging her towards the more profound realization. "If you want to reshape opinions at the top, start by determining what drives those opinions. Can you find a way to tie sustainability not just to ethics but to cold, hard profit? Position it not as an option, but as a necessity." Sarah contemplated this, her mind racing as she analyzed market trends and potential outcomes. A plan began to form, one that would require her to shift paradigms, framing sustainability as an opportunity for growth rather than a burden. But would Mark support her if she took the lead with such a bold approach? After her meeting with Naomi, Sarah returned to the office with renewed purpose. She spent the following days fleshing out a detailed proposal, one that not only highlighted the financial benefits of sustainable practices, but also positioned these initiatives as integral to the company's competitive edge. She meticulously crafted every element, aiming to preemptively address potential objections from hesitant stakeholders. Yet, as her presentation took shape, she felt a sense of foreboding. The stakes were rising. The day of the quarterly meeting loomed closer, and Sarah knew she would need to step firmly into the spotlight. Every confident statement would need to be paired with evidence, and every susceptibility must be countered with solid strategies. On the eve of the presentation, Sarah found herself restless, pacing her apartment. Her reflection in the window felt like a stranger, reminding her of the hurdles that lay ahead. As the sun set, she leaned against the cool glass, her mind racing. This was more than just a presentation. It was a turning point, a true test of her resolve. But was she ready? Could she transform the room's skeptics into allies? As anxiety gripped her, a powerful truth surged. She had come too far to back down now. Whether it would lead to victory or a fall, she had to face it head-on. With a last glance at her notes, she whispered a silent promise to herself. No matter the outcome, she would render her voice undeniable. The morning of the meeting, Sarah stepped into the boardroom, where whispers of uncertainty hung in the air. The table stretched out before her, dotted with the company's most influential players. In her chest, her heart hammered wildly, a mix of energy and fear. What choices lay ahead? Would the board embrace her vision or turn against it? The moment of truth was finally at hand. Sarah stood at the head of the polished boardroom table, the sunlight filtering through the tall windows, casting a glow that felt both promising and daunting. As the sea of critical faces turned toward her, doubt and determination wrestled within. Every breath she took felt heavy with the weight of expectation. This was her moment, yet the stakes felt insurmountable. She cleared her throat, prepared to unleash the vision that had consumed her thoughts for weeks. "Thank you all for being here," she began, striving to maintain a calm exterior. Inside, her mind raced, replaying Naomi's advice like a mantra. Understand their motivations. Tie your ideals to profits. She pressed forward, her pulse quickening. Today I want to discuss our approach to sustainability, not just as a responsibility, but as a catalyst for profitability. The board members exchanged glances, some skeptical, others subtly intrigued. Sarah took a breath and continued, infusing her words with conviction. She presented her meticulously crafted proposal, highlighting case studies of similar companies whose sustainable practices had led to increased market share and customer loyalty. Charts and projections flicked across the screen, drawing a line between sustainability and financial success. Yet, despite her efforts, she sensed the room's reluctance. A familiar voice pierced through her presentation, its owner known for his relentless pragmatism. "Interesting points, Sarah, but how do you propose we implement this without incurring significant costs? Our shareholders demand results, and quickly." His challenge ignited a fire in her. She refocused her thoughts. This was precisely the moment to showcase her understanding of their concerns. "I appreciate your question," she replied, feeling the energy shift. "What I propose isn't merely an expense but a strategic investment. By adopting these practices, not only do we meet the growing demand for socially responsible companies, but we also reduce waste and increase efficiency, leading to lower operational costs in the long run." As she spoke, she noticed Mark nodding subtly, his expression inscrutable. Was he on her side, or merely observing? Her confidence wavered briefly, but she shook it off, steering back into her narrative. Each bold statement propelled her forward, her passion weaving through the data like a lifeline. The conversation danced on the edge of contention. Questions flew around the room. Some were supportive, while others felt combative. Sarah engaged each member, adapting her responses, listening for cues. She felt adeptly aware of her environment, the boardroom's dynamics shifting with her words. Despite the pressure, she began to expand her approach, emphasizing collaboration and collective benefit. As the meeting progressed, Sarah realized she was no longer just presenting to the board. She was actively engaging them in a dialogue. Every critique became a gateway for further elaboration, and every nod of understanding from some stakeholders felt like a small victory. But there was doubt still lingering in the air, and it was time to tackle it head-on. "Let's talk about shareholder interests explicitly," she proposed, her voice steady, locking eyes with the dissenting member. "Imagine launching a campaign centered around our new sustainability measures that would not only improve our public image, but also ignite investor interest. This isn't just about ethics. It's about being at the forefront of a market trend that is rapidly becoming mainstream." The board's energy shifted, the tension melting slightly as discussions started overlapping. Sarah felt invigorated, riding the momentum. Mark leaned forward, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. Perhaps she had shifted something in him. But just when she thought she had the room engaged, another question arose, one that struck deeper than the financial implications. How can we trust that this initiative isn't just another corporate trend? What makes you sure it will command long-term loyalty from consumers? A stillness enveloped the room. Perhaps it was the hardest question she faced yet. The air felt thick. Sarah's mind raced, but she quickly honed in on an answer, drawing from her own experiences and convictions. Trust lies in transparency and commitment. If we as a company genuinely embrace sustainability and show our efforts through concrete actions, we build credibility. We don't just react to trends, we shape them. People are hungry for authenticity, and that's a promise we can deliver. The sincerity in her voice hung in the air, an unyielding challenge to the board. Just as the atmosphere began to shift towards acceptance, she noticed a subtle shift in Mark's demeanor, a flicker of acknowledgement mixed with apprehension. Feeling emboldened, Sarah took a decisive breath. Today, I'm offering a vision not just for our fiscal success, but for a legacy we can hold proud. Are we willing to be pioneers in this movement, or do we continue to trail behind? As the room fell into contemplation, she realized this was just the beginning. The battle for her ideas was not over. It was only just starting. Would their next step unite the board, or would it fracture her burgeoning alliance with Mark? With that uncertainty looming, Sarah understood now more than ever. This was about changing minds and earning trust in a corporate world that thrived on skepticism. The floor was theirs to reclaim, and she was ready. But the outcome remained unwritten. What decision would the board make next? Would her passion achieve the narrative she envisioned, or would the gates of dissent close tighter than before? The boardroom was engulfed in a heavy silence, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second amplifying Sarah's anxiety. She observed the shifting expressions of her colleagues. The weight of uncertainty lingered alongside the flickers of intrigue. It was a delicate balance, and the next few moments would shape her fate. Mark's steady gaze settled on her, a blend of respect and critique reflected in his deep-set eyes. Instead of retreating under the scrutiny, she leaned into it. Her posture firm, she channeled her resolve into a calm yet charged energy. It had been a long journey to reclaim this moment, and she carried the weight of her ambitions squarely on her shoulders. "Let's break this down further," Sarah proposed, wanting to guide the conversation. She reached for marker and whiteboard, her pulse quickening as she scribbled down an outline of the proposed action plan. "Here's how we can implement these sustainability initiatives step by step. We'll start small, with pilot projects that minimize risk and maximize visibility. Our first commitment could be a partnership with local suppliers committed to sustainable practices. This would elevate our public image without a hefty upfront investment." As she spoke, she felt the internal shift within herself. Confidence was blooming, cracking the shadows of self-doubt that had loomed over her. Each word breathed life into her ideas, framing a blueprint that made the seemingly impossible seem achievable. Mark's brow furrowed slightly, but she caught a glimmer of attention. "What about metrics?" another board member interjected, her curiosity sharpening the dialogue. "How can we quantify success and ensure it's sustainable not just in practice but also in revenue?" This was a question Sarah had anticipated. "Great point. We'll establish key performance indicators right from the start, monitoring waste reduction, cost savings, and customer satisfaction. Reporting on these will not only ensure transparency, but also showcase our commitment." Sarah's heart raced, a surge of adrenaline empowering her as she embraced the challenge, transforming it into an opportunity. The board's reactions began to shift, nods of agreement punctuating the room as she harnessed their skepticism into fuel. Minutes morphed into a dialogue filled with questions from the board rather than doubts. Collaborating in this way felt like an exhilarating dance. They were no longer adversaries, but allies who shared a mission. A flow of ideas emerged, each participant contributing, enhancing the collective vision. But amidst the electricity of the discussions, Sarah felt a prickle of fear. What if this was merely a fleeting moment, a facade of acceptance that would lead back to infighting? This fear compelled her to push further. "Mark, you mentioned the allure of trust and authenticity earlier. Let's establish a direct line of communication with our customers, community forums, social media Q&As. This will not only fortify consumer loyalty, but also hold us accountable. Would you be on board with that approach?" Mark hesitated, the gears in his mind visibly turning, and Sarah held her breath, awaiting his response. A moment stretched into a lifetime before he finally spoke. "If we can find a way to not only meet but exceed those expectations, I'm intrigued." The subtle shift in Mark's tone ignited a flicker of hope. If he felt that way, perhaps others in the room might follow suit. Yet there was still an underlying tension. The goal seemed closer, yet fraught with new challenges that required addressing the very elements that made her feel vulnerable. As the meeting wound down, Sarah gathered her notes. The adrenaline coursing through her veins transformed into a steely determination. Earning the board's buy-in was only the first of many hurdles to navigate. What would come next? While the spark of victory felt intoxicating, the shadows of uncertainty loomed just beyond the horizon. Did the board members truly share her vision? With their diverse motivations, would they unite behind her plans, or inevitably find a fault line in their collective resolve? As the board members filed out, Sarah turned to Mark, her pulse elevated with an urgent question lingering on her tongue. Would he truly offer her the mentorship and guidance she desperately needed to navigate the tumultuous waters ahead? Or was he merely a part of the tableau of skepticism she had to break? The stakes were far from over. She felt like she was teetering on the edge. What pivotal choice would she confront in the next board meeting? Would she be ready for the escalating challenges that lay ahead? The dim light of Sarah's office flickered as she stared at the whiteboard, now cluttered with the remnants of her fervent brainstorming session. Her mind raced with the discussions from the boardroom, replaying the moments as she grappled with the weight of expectation placed upon her. What had shifted? Yet a lingering doubt clung like a shadow, unfurling silently in the back of her mind. She began to write down her thoughts in her journal, a small habit formed over years of grappling with uncertainty. "Stay focused," she wrote. But the enormity of her ambition loomed larger than her conviction. Those doubts whispered, "What if they do not understand? What if they turn against you again?" But as she penned her reflections, a flicker of her earlier courage began to return. She had laid out an actionable plan, and she had captured the attention of Mark, a figure who had a vested interest in the outcome. Perhaps if she tackled her doubts directly, she could further cement her coalition. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her contemplation. Mark's name flickered on the screen. Was this a chance to solidify that connection? It may have been just an invitation to debrief, yet it felt monumental, a chance to extract clarity from the swirling chaos. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "Sarah, I wanted to talk about the meeting," he said, his voice steady. "Absolutely. I was just reflecting on the ideas we discussed. Every piece feels more tangible now." "Good to hear, but I sensed a hesitance. We need strategy and team alignment as much as vision. Are you prepared for pushback?" The directness of his question hit her squarely in the chest. She had anticipated differences of opinion, but hearing it from him was a reminder that not all synergy was guaranteed. "I recognize that," she replied, each word deliberate. "But isn't that the market's nature, to challenge us? I believe if we communicate our intentions clearly, the team will rally. We need to back our vision with actionable metrics. Metrics will help, but communication is only one half of the equation. Are you ready to confront those who might not share your ambition, to defend your ideas when doubts surface?" The gravity of his inquiry sank in. Confrontation was a terrain she had mostly evaded, fearing it would expose her vulnerabilities. But if she was to step into this role and seize her vision, she had to be able to navigate around dissent. "What advice do you have?" she asked, probing for insights, feeling the weight of expectation shift from her shoulders to his. "Be prepared with data. Anticipate objections and frame your responses. Confidence breeds confidence. You'll have to turn their questions into a canvas for your answers. It's a dual dance. Lead with vision while guarding against assertions that may undermine you." As the call wrapped up, a new sense of purpose sparked within her. What Mark imparted felt less like a directive and more like a partnership, a silent nod between two warriors preparing for battle. He was offering her a glimpse at what mentorship could be, a guiding light into the unpredictability of corporate waters. Smiling to herself, she understood that her journey was illuminating strength she had yet tapped into. Each interaction at the board would be a crucible, revealing not only her capacity for resilience, but the possibility of forging new alliances. But then, a new tension surfaced. Sarah realized that while Mark's guidance was invaluable, there were still those who would oppose her, maybe even sabotage her plans. Would her aspirations lead her to confrontation, battling those foundational doubts that had tagged along for so long? She clenched her fist, the sense of impending action pooling in her gut. The next meeting would not merely be a formality, it would be a reckoning. the decision crystallized within her. She would not just bring a plan to the table, she would own it. Would she muster the courage to confront her critics, or would hesitation pave the path back to doubt? The scales tipped, and she knew the answers lay ahead in the tumult of the boardroom. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something significant. The moment would inevitably carve her new path. But how would she face the challenge as the audience gazed, judgment laid bare? Each second in the lead-up to that meeting felt pregnant with possibility, tantalizing and terrifying all at once. The next morning, Sarah woke early, the pale sunlight streaming through her window like a spotlight. Today was not just another workday. It was an opportunity to redefine her trajectory. As she dressed, each piece she put on felt like armor against an impending battle, a fight for her ideas and her position within the company. Looking in the mirror, she steeled herself against the uncertainty that threatened to unravel her resolve. "You can do this," she whispered, her own mantra echoing back. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Colleagues greeted her with bright smiles, but she felt the weight of expectation beneath it all. Her resolve would be tested. She made her way to the conference room, where the board would gather to analyze her vision. The digital clock on the wall ticked down the minutes, each second amplifying the tension coiling in her stomach. Glancing at her notes, she mentally prepared for the worst-case scenarios Mark had outlined. Dissent could arise sharply, objections were inevitable, yet she would not falter. With clarity, she began to visualize her path through the potential chaos. As she stood at the head of the table, the room filled with familiar faces took their seats, the air shifting palpably as she began. "Thank you all for being here. Today we will delve into a plan that not only aims to drive growth, but to innovate the way we engage with our customers." With that, she launched into her presentation, outlining the metrics and strategies she'd devised. The data had been meticulously gathered, and she spoke with an authority she hadn't known she possessed. But as she transitioned to her next point, she noted a shift in the room. John, a senior member who often played the role of antagonist, leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "Sarah, while your numbers are compelling, I have to wonder if now is truly the time for such bold rebranding efforts. The market is unpredictable, and our current projects are still unsteady." His words struck like a match against her well-crafted response. Heart racing, Sarah took a breath. This moment was not new. It was a test of her willingness to enforce her ideas. She anticipated this and knew she could turn his challenge into an opportunity. "John, I appreciate your concern. However, this is precisely why robust metrics are essential. Our customers are evolving, and we must evolve with them. Ignoring this could leave us stagnant. What I propose is not radical. It is a calculated response to increasing consumer demands." A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. She could feel eyes shifting toward Mark. His presence anchored her conviction. "Stagnation could lead to irrelevance," she added, channeling the conviction that surged within her. "Is that where we want to be?" John's brows knitted, the challenge painted on his face. "But what if we stretch ourselves too thin?" Here it came, the verbal tussle she had to navigate. "We can manage our resources intelligently. The risks are part of innovation, wouldn't you agree? What we gain could vastly outweigh the initial hesitation." With each clarification, the atmosphere shifted. Small nods appeared, eyes brightening with understanding. She could sense it. She was leading them, guiding their doubts into a fertile ground for her vision to take root. As discussions continued, Sarah knew the tide had begun to turn. Yet, there was still a nagging feeling, a question lingering in the back of her mind. Had she truly won them over? Or was this merely a lull of acquiescence? As her presentation concluded, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with anxiety. The next words could fortify her standing or tip her back into uncertainty. The silence following her wrap-up hung heavily, thick with expectation. She was met with a mix of approval and continued skepticism, with the contradiction echoing within her. "Let's move forward with the plans proposed," Mark finally declared, the weight of gravity behind his voice. But even as victory whispered in her ear, she knew this was just the beginning. There was still work to be done, still those who might resist openly, skeletons buried yet to rattle. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah caught John's steely gaze, challenging yet contemplative. The realization gripped her. The confrontation was not merely about today, but an ongoing conflict that would shape her journey. Her path to true leadership lay ahead, where doubts could either overshadow her progress or become stepping stones toward profound growth. In the days that followed, she pondered what tactics she would deploy, not just to win over the skeptics, but to dismantle the constructs that plagued her confidence. Would she be strong enough to navigate the interpersonal minefield, the silent power struggles lurking below discussions? The time had come to face not just her critics, but the deeper conflict within herself. The sun broke through the fog that often enveloped San Francisco, revealing a vibrant landscape that resonated with Sarah's transformed spirit. The previous weeks had been a crucible of confrontation and growth, refining her perspective as she took the reins of her ambitions. Today, she stood in front of her colleagues and the board, not as an unsure office administrator, but as a formidable advocate for change. With a newfound clarity stemming from her experience, Sarah had created a compelling framework to communicate the sustainability initiative. The latest gathering promised to solidify her place in a world that once felt inhospitable to her ideas. Each slide projected onto the screen carried not just numbers, but the hopes of a community craving accountability and responsibility from those at the top. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, feeling the energy in the room shift as she locked eyes with Mark, who sat to her right. "Today, I'll outline how sustainability not only aligns with our corporate values, but positions us as industry leaders. Our customers demand authenticity, and we can't afford to ignore that." As she deftly navigated through her well-rehearsed presentation, data points flew by in support of her vision, bolstered by clear, well-researched projections. The board's initial skepticism slowly dissipated as they began to engage, challenging her with questions that now felt invigorating rather than intimidating. "Sarah," John posed, leaning in with interest, "how do we ensure our stakeholders embrace this initiative without meting out shareholder dissatisfaction?" This was the moment she had envisioned. Sarah smiled, recognizing this not as an adversarial jab, but as an opportunity to showcase her depth of understanding. "If we communicate clearly about our long-term vision and how these practices will actually save money and boost customer loyalty, we can turn even the staunchest critics into advocates. Stakeholder satisfaction lies in trust, and credible sustainability efforts can elevate our brand." The room responded with nods of approval, a tentative wave of acceptance building. Mark leaned forward, clearly engaged, and Sarah seized the moment, fueled by a sense of ownership and commitment to her narrative. Throughout the meeting, she felt a solidifying confidence. Each question brought her ideas closer to the consensus she so desperately sought. Her voice rang with authority and authenticity. It was exhilarating. She was no longer operating in the fog of uncertainty. She was at the forefront of defining change within the organization. As discussions lingered, Mark chimed in, affirming her statements. "Sarah brings valuable insights. This isn't merely about appeasing public sentiment, it's strategically sound. We can't allow ourselves to become obsolete. If we take decisive action now, we have the chance to lead rather than follow." Unbeknownst to her, these words resonated deeply. It had felt like a lifetime since she had been dismissed or considered insignificant. That earlier version of herself would have retreated under the weight of formidable personalities, but today she stood tall, asserting her place with newfound tenacity. As the meeting drew to a close, a sense of palpable accomplishment washed over her. The initiatives had received overwhelming support, the board members willing to take a calculated leap into the unknown, with her guiding them through the fog of uncertainty. Once the meeting adjourned and the applause faded into the background, Sarah felt a wellspring of accomplishment multiply within her. She had steered her vision to fruition, earning not just respect, but admiration in the process. Yet, even as the excitement buzzed in her chest, she was mindful of the challenges ahead. The road would remain complex. Convincing individual stakeholders and addressing internal conflict required constant vigilance. But her footing felt secure, and her resolve was firm. She turned to Mark, gratitude mixing with her excitement. "Thank you for seeing the potential in this." "Well done, Sarah. You proved that your voice matters. You're just getting started," he responded, a glint of respect behind his usual guarded demeanor. With each step forward, she carried the weight of her dreams on her shoulders, a potent mixture of ambition and responsibility. Sarah realized that not only had she transformed the working culture around her, but she had also earned the recognition and competence she sought within herself. She shattered the glass ceiling that loomed over her with fierce determination. The fog that once concealed her potential had lifted, revealing a future bright with opportunity. Sarah emerged, no longer just a cog in the machine, but a leader with a vision capable of propelling others forward. Allowing herself a brief moment of pride, she acknowledged the journey. Hers was one marked by a deep understanding of both the personal stakes involved and the complexities of the corporate landscape. Reflecting on the future ahead, Sarah understood that this was not merely a battle won, but the beginning of a legacy. It was the start of a career where her voice echoed confidently in the boardroom, one that would drive change and promote sustainable practices for years to come. And with that, her journey continued, a testament to the power of tenacity, vision, and unwavering belief in herself. Now, if you found this story inspiring and want to continue witnessing powerful transformations, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm so more people can see these narratives that matter. I urge you to comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey. Your insights add to our thrilling dialogue. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's uplift the stories of personal overcoming together.